If you like Kool-Aid, can you shout, "Hey Kool-Aid"?
Hey Kool-Aid!
Okay, I need it again. Hey Kool-Aid. If you really love Kool-Aid, scream, "Hey Kool-Aid."
Oh yeah! Hi everyone, how's it going? Did you guys enjoy those pretzels? So who actually does like Kool-Aid? Raise your hand, we got one. Okay, let's see if I can. Well, I almost got there. Anyways, oh yeah. So how many of y'all, raise up hands, how many of y'all have heard of this buzzword before? Yeah, a few people, okay. I should see more hands up, right? Because reactive programming is the hot, right? How many of y'all practice reactive programming? Few hands, okay, just a few, okay. Keep your hands up if you only use reactive programming to impress your colleagues. All right, I should see way more hands than that. Okay, so the idea of reactive programming actually, and for those of you who may not be familiar or dipping your toe in or have just heard the buzzword before, it's actually all around us. So you might even be programming reactively and not even realize it. And this is what I wanted to explain today. So I'm surrounded by good friends who are reactive programming experts. And when I talk to them, it's like, oh yeah, of course, reactive programming. But when I first heard it, I was like, this is so cool. What is this thing? I want to do it. But the reason why I wanted to give this talk is because I wanted to be able to have you all understand and digest it in a way that you can actually apply it to your everyday lives. So the first question is, what actually really is reactive programming, right? So here's the Wikipedia definition. It's a little bit long. I'm going to go through it with y'all, but it says that reactive programming is a programming paradigm concerned with data streams and the propagation of change. What this means is that it becomes possible to express static or dynamic data streams with ease via the employed programming language, and that an inferred dependency with the associated execution model exists, which facilitates the automatic propagation of the change involved with data flow. So that is like a lot of words, but in layman's terms, what reactive programming is, it's dealing with sets of events over a period of time by the automatic propagation of change. So what you're doing is you're actually implicitly, not explicitly propagating your data. Each step within your application doesn't actually know or care about what the previous step is or what the inputs are. All it wants to do is perform an action on those inputs and then move on. So Excel is a really great example. If you look at Excel, this is a very basic understanding of just what reactive programming is. You have A, I love all programming. And D is going to concatenate A, B, and C, right? But D doesn't care what A, B, and C are. You can say, I love reactive programming, and then D will just implicitly know, okay, A, B, and C gave me something, and then I'm concatenating, and I'm performing this action, and I'm done. So this is like the most basic fundamental understanding of what actually reactive programming is. So I'll go ahead and take this off now, but I wish I brought some Kool-Aid packets for y'all, but I wasn't prepared enough, so I just have fruit snacks. At least Tracy got one. So my name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLead. I love to meet y'all and talk to everybody, so come say hi anytime. I'm the co-founder of a company called This.media and This.labs. At This.media, we love to do really cool, amazing things related to the JavaScript community. So whether it's online events or events anywhere, check out the content. At This.labs, we do a lot of really cool things related to framework agnostic consulting. We have a really amazing mentoring as a service, so check that out as well. I'm also a Google developer expert for the web and Angular. When I was putting this together, I actually realized that I do too much. I'm also on the RxJS core team and RxJS learning team, and I love JavaScript. So whether it's React, Angular, RxJS, etc., if it's JavaScript, I either have plans to touch it or I have. This.JavaScript, we're doing a state of JavaScript on February 22nd, where Igor Minar will be giving a 10-minute state of Angular, as well as all the other core contributors of different frameworks and libraries. That's awesome. We're also doing Angular contributor days in just a little bit with the Angular team, so that'll be amazing. You guys can attend everywhere. It's going to be broadcasted online. If you want to see me in person, come visit one of the Google developer groups, whether you're in the Silicon Valley or Triangle. Also, Women Tech Makers Lead. So, women you know. Google has a really amazing Women Tech Makers program. I highly encourage you all to get involved, especially in Atlanta. They're looking for more leads, so you get perks. I know about the perks. Ask me about the perks. Modern Web Podcast as well, we have a really cool podcast. So the main thing about this talk, though, right, the reason I'm up here is because I want to demystify reactive programming, right? It's not magic, but I do encourage you to drink the Kool-Aid, and you should. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I need to do it better. One thing to note is that the ideas around reactive programming are actually very subjective. So this talk is really to help you get some light bulbs in your mind going off on how to think about reactive programming in the future. If you do have a well, actually, I have these two best friends, Ben and Jay, and we actually spent hours and hours and hours going back and forth on these concepts and what I should add into this talk. So they actually spend a lot of time well actuallying each other. Tweet them. They're ready for you. They know that slide's in there. So we're going to talk about a few things. First thing is reactive programming in standards, frameworks, and libraries. The second thing is how and why to utilize it. And then the third thing is how to actually implement it using something like RxJS. Now, in standards and basically in standards. So in the past few years, what we've seen is we've seen a lot of standards begin to consider and adopt reactive programming paradigms. So in TC39, you have promises, you have observable. In WHATWG, currently there is an EventTarget Observable proposal. And then in frameworks, whether it's Vue, D3, React, or Angular, you see reactive programming paradigms. I'll only talk about the stuff happening in Angular today. But let's first go to promises. So promises were introduced around 2014 to browsers and then included in the ES 2015 spec. How many of y'all thought promises were reactive? No hands. One hand, two hands. All right, well, anyways. So it's reactive programming because what it allows you to do is process a value asynchronously and in steps through then blocks. So if you just look at the fetch API here, I'm fetching a fruitsnack.json file, and then I'm chaining together promises, and then I'm basically mapping it to a JavaScript object. And then once that's done, I'm console logging, I got fruit snacks! Sebastian, are you listening? I was throwing fruit snacks at you. Oh, there we go. Good catch. Good catch. You can check caniuse.com to check out a little bit more about promises. But the reason why most people don't think of promises as reactive programming is because most of the code associated with promises and around promises is imperative, right? But promises in itself are reactive. So we can also look at the TC39 observable proposal. So this was introduced April 30th, 2015. Currently at stage 1, it adds observable as a primitive. It's very similar to how promises were added, and it's actually the most popular and well-known reactive programming paradigm. In fact, if you look at RxJS 4 and 5, there's 8 million monthly downloads monthly, and that number is growing. RxJS 5 is also the reference implementation to the TC39 observable proposal. So if you want this, go to GitHub, check out the proposal observable, and then comment and snipe them and bike shed all the things. WHATWG EventTarget Observable proposal. So this is something that's very recently, it was actually just proposed by Ben Lesh, who is the author of RxJS 5. And this was proposed on behalf of Google, December 12th, 2017. And what it does is, if it's introduced, it's going to add a method called on to event target. So if you call the on method with an event type as the argument, then it's going to give you back an observable of those events. So we can put it on button, add the on method, and then pass a click event as the argument, and then you're going to go ahead and get back an observable of click events. This also comes with a few operators, map, filter, first, and take and tell. And again, you can look at this. It's on the WHATWG GitHub, issue number 544. If you look at that and you want this, send comments so that people can get excited about it. Now, let's look at reactive programming in frameworks and libraries. Like I said before, right, a lot of reactive programming paradigms, they're not necessarily, it's not like people meant to make it reactive programming, right? And the reason for that is because reactive is just a fancy term for everything we always do. No one invented reactive programming. We've just given it this name for this pattern of declaratively reacting to the propagation of change. So that was oh, is it magic? No, not really. But in Angular, we are so fortunate because Angular and RxJS are basically best friends, right? Who doesn't love RxJS? You might not like it in your code, but once you get it, you will. So RxJS is a first-class citizen in Angular, and what it enables not only the library authors, but also us as a community to do are amazing things like the on-push change detection strategy. So when you enable this, it actually really provides your application with more efficient and performant data flow, because what it's going to do is push changes at you versus detecting changes. And grx as well, it's just a Redux pattern that's re-implemented in RxJS. The Angular router heavily uses observables, so you can get observables of various events around activated routes, like observable of changes to route parameters or query parameters, and then also forms as well, right? Because all validation events are reactive, it really allows the asynchronous and synchronous validation events to blend together really nicely. And there's tons of other really cool ways that Angular utilizes RxJS. So we talked a little bit about, where we see it in standards, frameworks, and libraries, but then now let's talk about how and why to actually utilize reactive programming. So if we think about the way we solve problems right now, we're mostly taught to solve problems imperatively. So if we look at just imperative problem solving, it usually looks like this, right? Some event's going to fire, we give an event a bunch of instructions, and then each step can only happen because a previous step happened. So we're typically giving our applications very explicit instructions versus implicit instructions. But with reactive program solving, you have a much more declarative approach to how you solve problems, and you're able to compose things into steps with abstractions very similar to like RxJS. Here is a simple drag and drop that was implemented with RxJS in an Angular application. And with very few simple lines of code, we're actually able to create something really complex. So I implemented this with this amazing app that I made. So I love fruit snacks, which these are fruit snacks. I'm going to give you all fruit snacks. You guys are good catches. But I love fruit snacks. I don't like orange fruit snacks. And so I save all my orange fruit snacks for Jay in a Ziploc bag. I'm not even joking. So I implemented this drag and drop, and I was like, what do I make? Well, I stared at this for like 2 weeks, Jay, eating fruit snacks. It's pretty great, but it's in real life. So getting back to the benefits of reactive programming, when you start thinking reactively, right, just like you saw with that drag and drop, I was able to implement a hard problem with a very few lines of code. Reactive programming is not necessarily declarative, but typically it is sort of intrinsically declarative versus imperative, right? So I'm sure you're thinking, okay, that's kind of cool, but then, right, like how do I actually get started, right? How do I actually start thinking reactively? Well, I'll give you a little more Kool-Aid to drink. So to approach reactive programming, the most important thing is this idea of thinking reactively. And there's sort of 3 things you need to sort of understand and wrap your mind around. The first thing is the idea that everything can be modeled as an event. The second is that all web apps are actually event-driven. And then the third is that everything can be represented as a set of values over time, even events. So let's dig into this whole idea of sets of values over time. So when I talk about set, what I mean is set in the math sense, right? And what we're trying to do when we think about things as sets is change the current mindset, which is, okay, when an action happens, we get one value back, to all events are sets of values. So I think some of the hardest things is to understand that an empty set is still a set. 0 is still a set. 1, 2, 3 is still a set. And once you can actually, get your mind thinking about that and structure applications to be that, then you can start modeling your data in a very consistent and declarative way, and then you can start doing a lot more. So if you look at the Apple logo, for example, right? The Apple logo is the Apple logo, but over the years, the Apple logo has changed over time. This is the same as, like, let's say you set a breakpoint on a variable in your application, and then you go and run your app, and you go back and do things, and then you keep coming back to that variable. You're going to see that variable changing in value over time, right? But what you can do actually is now represent that variable as an observable or as a set of values, right? Instead of doing something imperatively like going back to Apple and constantly saying like Apple equals this, it can actually be a set. So when everything is a set of values, the idea of being able to do more with your data is pretty awesome. If everything is a set, you can query things, you can map them, you can filter them, you can join and combine them in different ways, you can give something half a set of things, you can get things with a set of parameters, right? If I just want all the rainbow Apple logos, I can get that. So that's why, once you start thinking about things as sets of values over time, then life is awesome. But after that, then it's like, okay, well, now how do I implement this information? Well, reactive programming using RxJS is definitely a good idea. So I love RxJS, obviously, but there are tons of other ways to implement reactive programming. But obviously, since we're at an Angular conference and I love RxJS, we're going to talk about RxJS. So how many of you know what RxJS is? Yeah? Okay. I would assume so. Let me give you another definition. It's actually a domain-specific language that sits on top of JavaScript for reacting to events. It's also the most popular reactive programming library, so let's not go ahead and forget that. But the reason why you should use it is because just like that drag and drop I showed you, you can do powerful things with much less code. There's also other dialects, so RxJava, RxPHP, Rx.NET. So as you're working with backend teams, let's say, who are on .NET, if they're using Rx.NET and you're using RxJS, you guys have a common language that you can understand, and that's kind of cool. It also provides you with a powerful abstraction in the form of observables, so you guys can future-proof your code. I love that. Jay and Ben give me crap for saying that, but but it's true, and I'll show you why, I promise. And also, when you learn something like Rx, you can actually very easily mix and match and refactor little bits of your application with very little effort. So let's talk about this whole idea of abstractions and future-proofing your code and stuff like that. So if you use observable as an abstraction for everything, then it's really easy to change out the inputs over time, right? So imagine if you have a car, and your car is your application, and your engine is actually your observable of power. So usually, right, you're thinking about your car right now as, okay, in order to power my car, I need gas, right? So, but the thing is that as long as you have that abstraction there and that observable emits power, it doesn't matter that the power came from gas. The power can come from Kool-Aid, it can come from McDonald's, it can come from hamsters, right? This totally doesn't actually matter. Dimitri, I got this from you. Hamster attack, hamsters. Also Ember maybe, but anyways. I digress. So that's why it's so cool, right? You care much less, when you have this abstraction, you care much less about what the input is. If in the future you want to have your input, we have VR, we saw Uri using the headset, right, and OpenPCI with brainwaves. If you want to do things like that, you can simply create an observable and then merge that observable together to the observable of power. And again, the car doesn't care. The car is going to run on power, but it doesn't matter where the power actually came from, right? So that's the whole idea. I like that. So we talked a little bit about that, and then the next thing is this idea of mixing and matching and refactoring bits of your application. So if you remember my beautiful application, I love my app, we have Jay, and we can feed Jay, but I want to add a little bit more functionality, right? Maybe I want to know how many fruit snacks I fed Jay at any given point in time. So I can do that super easily, because, again, I'm just doing this in an Angular application, and I have my code over here, so let's make sure my server's running and I can feed Jay. Oh, you know what I need to do is mirror my display. There we go. Okay, now you can see. So you can see that I have Jay, and I have my fruit snack app right here. And then what I have over here is I have my code. But if I want to just simply add in a little bit of stuff, can you guys see right there? Probably. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my HTML really quickly, and I'm just going to go ahead and add a quick div right here, and my div is just going to say, you fed Jay fruit snacks. My life is so interesting with Jay in my life. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and subscribe to the observable called Eaten, which I haven't created yet. And I'm using Angular's pipe async, which is going to allow me to subscribe to the observable once the component initializes and unsubscribe once it's removed from the view. So you can see over there, it says now you fed Jay fruit snacks, right? Now if I go ahead and go into my app component, I'm going to go ahead and create a few things. So first I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new subject called increment. Increment equals new subject. It's going to be a subject of any. And I also need to make sure that I'm importing that. So I'm going to import subject from RxJS/subject. Go ahead and save that. In addition to that, I know I'm going to be using the scan operator in just a second, so I'm going to add scan to my import array right there. And then what I'm doing is I'm creating a property called eaten on my, and then I'm calling it this.increment. And then I'm going to use pipe, and then I'm going to use scan over here, and then I'm just going to count. So count +1. I need to make sure to initialize my counter with 0. Go ahead and save that. And then on every mouse up, right, so if I'm feeding J, on every mouse up, I want to go ahead and actually have it increment. So let's see. I'm going to use a tap, and then tap is this dot increment. Go ahead and save that. And if I save that, then if I feed J, you'll see that I fed J 1 fruit snack, 2 fruit snacks. And I fed Igor's face, and that's the problem. But let's look at the code again, right? Like I was able to create an increment with like, I don't know, 1, 2, how many lines of code do you count that as? 2 or 3? So kind of awesome, right? Yes, no, maybe? Well, you know, I want to also take this, you know, and I want to show you just like how awesome it is to have declarative code. So we're going to add one more thing, like if I'm feeding Igor Ben's face, right? I mean, it's still feeding J fruit snacks. It's still saying I fed J fruit snacks. But I'm going to go ahead and filter it. So I created a function called is in J's mouth. And I did a little math to figure out where on earth J's mouth was, right? And all I need to do is go back to eaten and just add a little filter thing right here and then filter on J's mouth. So I can do that, client X, client Y over there. And then arrow function is in J's mouth. Client X, whoops, X, client Y, and then I need to comma chain. Isn't it funny that we're not dot chaining, but we're comma chaining now? I find it amusing. But now if I feed Igor's mouth, right, it says I'm not feeding J fruit snacks, but if I'm feeding his mouth, it says I am. You fed J 3 fruit snacks. You fed J 4 fruit snacks. Hours, guys, hours of this. I love J. Okay, so anyways, that was awesome. And that's sort of what I wanted to show you. And again, this is the value and the benefit of reactive programming and just like, you know, by default, sort of declarative programming as well. Your application becomes a really cool bunch of Legos that you can mix and match and move around. So we talked a little bit about why to use RxJS, right? Doing powerful things with less code, like imagine multiplex WebSockets. We're doing a workshop tomorrow. That'll be fun. Other dialects, right, being able to understand. So you should totally ask, like, your other teams, do you use Rx? Do you not get this? Let's work together. This idea of it being a really cool abstraction and the idea that, like, as time moves on, you can future-proof your code through that, and the idea that you can mix and match and refactor different things as well. So what I really wanted you all to take away from this talk was that if you look, right, reactive programming is everywhere, you know. No one invented it. It's just a name for something we've all been doing already, right? This idea of declaratively reacting to the propagation of change. Also, trying to get you guys starting to think about everything can be modeled as a set of values over time, even events. And this is the last point that I actually didn't get to touch on, but I can't wait because I'm totally going to do this. It's UI library agnostic, RxJS specifically. So it allows you to decrease the amount of framework-specific code you write. So if all your business logic is in Rx, then like taking something from an Angular app to a React app to a Vue app to whatever is super easy. It's literally copy paste. I love it. So RxJS, maybe not the easiest thing to learn, but you can contribute by the docs. So these are the new docs. Look how beautiful they are. This is literally just an Angular app using Angular material. I haven't launched it yet. The team hasn't launched it yet. We're still trying to figure out, you know, anyways, some HTTPS stuff. But regardless, it'll be launched in the next few weeks. But if you do want to contribute, this is like such a really cool, easy way. It's literally the easiest open source project I have contributed to because it literally is just an Angular app. So you can go to reactivex/rxjs-docs, Tons of new contributors there. Check out the issues. We have a private Slack as well, so if you want to get involved, just email me or email me anyways just to say hi. I don't care. It's totally awesome. I love hearing from everybody. And you know, I couldn't have done this without mentors. So this.labs, we have this mentoring as a service type thing where we work with all these amazing core contributors, and you can pair with them too. It's the best part of my life. I love it. And with that, just special thanks to all my talk mentors. So Jay and Ben spent hours and hours and hours talking with me through like reactive programming. And then Elle as well made this more fun. That's why I bought the Kool-Aid outfit. And then Ashwin and Dima as well for helping me with some of the code and crying. Lots of crying. So stay in touch. Please feel free to find me at Lady Elite. Say hi, and thanks everyone for listening.